Okay, this is part two of a three-part series with Kenny Embry. It was in a conference by the Excellence in Leadership Institute, of which I'm a part, and Kenny and I were dialoguing about communication and leadership, and you don't want to miss this. It's awesome.
You are listening to The Leadersmith, Darren Gerdes.
Yeah, but a certain time you gotta get beyond the theoretical and just do the thing.
Bingo.
Right? Whatever it is
Yeah.
that you fear, you just have to get it and do that thing.
The problem with my profession is we were probably too much ready, aim, 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 fire. And I think one of the things that I have appreciated about entrepreneurs are they are ready, fire, aim.
Yep.
And, Darren and I both have a podcast. I have a faith-based podcast. Darren has a leadership podcast. By the way, it's a great podcast. We have two different approaches to podcasting. But the thing about it is both Darren and I basically have the same strategy, which is, you know what? Let's just go ahead and do an episode on that, and let's see how it works.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, guess what? I don't do next time. One of the guys I interviewed 2 or 3 weeks ago, his name's Phil Robertson. Yeah, he's very well spoken, but he was talking about Christian parenting, and I was like, oh my goodness, do I need to do another show on Christian parenting? Tripled the number of downloads I've had in
Wow.
any of my other episodes, and apparently, yeah, people are interested in Christian parenting. Who knew? I didn't.
Yeah.
Until I tried it. So I would say, but one of the things that is really important is when you start thinking about communication and relationships, the important part that engineer starts need to figuring out is what kind of relationships do you have?
Mhm.
How much communication do you need to give? And how do you need to give that communication? I think the problem that most people have with communication is in Christianity, we talk about how often should you read your Bible, and the answer is always more than you're doing it, and so there's a never-ending supply of guilt.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that happens to all of us is we know communication is really important. How? Well, we've been told communication is really important
Mhm.
by every job description, by every manager we've ever had, and heaven help us, we have been told that we need to over communicate.
Mhm.
But my problem is where I work, on the average day, I will get about 80 emails from my bosses and my bosses of bosses and the bosses of those. You tell me what I would be doing if I just read email all day long. I mean, the fact of the matter is the university is over communicating with me.
Yeah.
And I push back on that all the time.
Yeah.
If communication is primarily relational, you need to start asking different questions. What works?
Yeah,
What
that's
communicating?
interesting. So, I mean, I see the parallels to leadership. And we just talked about this. The suffix ship means relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Leadership, leader follower. Citizenship, state and citizen. Friendship, friend and friend, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, communication should also be in a relationship. And if you think in those terms, I think a lot just changed in our mindset,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about what is effective communication. What, like, other than relationship, what else does effective communication look like? What are the advantages of effective communication?
Well, if you're talking effective communication or affective communication,
Effective.
okay. The thing about with effective communication is you need to communicate as much as needs to be done and no more. Um, the fact of the matter is my wife and I basically have an afternoon conversation. Why? Because we need an afternoon conversation. In the grand scheme of things, no. It's not like I mean, we run out of topics of conversation after about 5 minutes, but you know why we communicate?
You're going to tell me.
Well, thank you.
That's a way of me saying not having to admit that I don't know.
This is the reason I talk to my wife every day, because she's important. She is taking priority. She's taking priority in who I'm talking to. And she knows at 5 o'clock, we're talking. That's what's happening.
Yep.
And that is, there's an expectation. And by the way, if I miss it, I mean, we occasionally have to, but if I miss it or she misses it, there needs to be a pretty darn good explanation why.
Yeah.
Because there's that expectation. And what are the topics of that conversation? And when you start looking at effective communication, what most of us never do is start setting up expectations about when you can and should hear about something.
Hmm.
And I think it's that if you're married, here's the conversation you didn't have, which was who's taking out the trash. Nobody has that conversation before they get married. And the amazing thing is, my wife and I didn't either. And I remember we were married for a couple weeks, and she said, "When are you going to take out that trash?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I thought you were taking out the trash." No, that's your job. Really? Since when?
That's what you
And
have. That's what you have sons for.
well, we didn't have sons, but I mean, since when is it my job? Well, here it is. We're going to have to define that. We're going to have to define what a realistic expectation is. And apparently, the way we defined it was basically a holdover from my parents' relationships with me
Mhm.
and her parents' relationship with her. And basically, what we ended up with was anything that's outside the house is my responsibility. Anything that's inside the house is hers. Is that fair? I don't care. Um, I don't care if it's fair. It works.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is, if I want to fight that fight, I can fight that fight.
Yeah.
And if it's worth fighting that fight, I'll fight it. But what am I looking for? Am I
Who's in
looking
charge?
for?
Who's in
Huh?
charge of the dog?
Yeah, I'm afraid. Just a second. Give me just 1 second.
Hey, no worries.
Vamp for me, sir, for a second.
You know, one of the beauties of COVID has been that we are all okay with this. Like my kids are screaming in the next room. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear it, and I find it disconcerting. But it doesn't affect anybody. Like we're all home. I mean, we know that. So one of the beauties of COVID is that it's allowed us all to chill, right? So
Yes, I'll go ahead and tell you that. Well, I mean, we are so excited today. Um, the repairman is coming to fix the ice maker. We have been without ice for 4 days,
and you
and
live
we
in
are
Florida.
yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, this has been and
Yeah.
my 12-year-old son came at 13. He just turned 13. My 13-year-old son was like, "When do we get ice? When do we get ice?" And I was like, "What's
4 days without ice. I'm calling it the Geneva Convention. Okay. Anyway, we got to get back to the story here. So
Yes,
we're talking about effective communication, and so I
right.
want to get you. Do you want to finish that point, or do you want me to ask the next question?
We do buy ice, Barb. We have bought lots of ice. That's the problem. Now you got to get it in the ice maker. The thing, it's not creating the ice anymore, but it will do the little screw thing where it actually pulls it out. And the ice cubes are a little bit too big to get through very well. So I mean, we have played this game. Okay, the fact of the matter is, you need to start defining, and this is counterintuitive to all of us. You need to start you need to start articulating what rules you want. So, for example, in my classes, one of the things that I use a lot is I use Microsoft Teams.
Mhm.
Why? And I tell all my students, if you really need to go get a hold of me, talk to me through Microsoft Teams. And they're all like, but yeah, but that's another tool. Bingo. Everybody and their brother knows my email address. Everybody. And practically nobody knows my Microsoft Teams address.
I don't even know your Microsoft Teams address, and
And there's
we're
a good reason for
co-authoring a paper
that.
that we're presenting in 2 weeks.
I
How,
know,
how
I know.
terrible is that?
But I said, if you know that address, you're somebody I want to talk to. In other words, there's the channel. Well, Darren, I'm sorry
Yeah.
I had to learn this way. Um, there's the channel, and I have set up the expectation, and I have also set up the channel.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'm very clear about this. I have told I used to hoard my telephone and hide my telephone number from my students, at great peril. I would guard it with my life. I give it out like candy anymore.
Yeah, they don't
Eh,
call you.
They don't use the phone.
Yeah.
No, they don't
It's
use
like
the
they
phone
don't
at
know
all.
how.
They don't.
Yeah.
I get, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. The people that I give it to, and the other thing that I would say, and this is to their credit, uh, they're respectful.
Mhm.
My students are largely respect because they know this is a private piece of information that I do not want to be public,
Mhm.
and they are respectful. And I tell them, look, The wife and I get up at 4:30 in the morning and we go to bed at 9. Consider 7 o'clock a time in the morning, a time I'm still not coherent, but and consider anything past 5 probably a time that I'm with my family. And they have with I mean, on occasion they'll be like, and they're very apologetic. Dr. Embry, I know this is when you're with your family. Bingo, you got it.
Good, because you set the
Would
stage, right? I
That's
mean, that's
exactly
it.
I set the
You know,
expectation.
when you were talking about expectations, like in family before, I know that in my experience, when I roll back the clock and think about my life, myself and my wife, it was expectations that were half the issue of any
Yeah,
issues that we had. Probably
yeah,
more than half the issue, right? I mean,
yeah,
we just
yeah,
like, well, I thought you would do this. Well, I would. And where'd it come from? From our parents, right? So,
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right, and that difference of expectation and is really the source of almost all your conflicts. And by the way, I mean, John Gottman is one of the foremost researchers on this. He came up with what he called, I think it's either the 4 or 5 horsemen of the apocalypse. He was able to, predict with over 95% accuracy
mhm.
which couples would get divorced. You have you read this
Yeah,
research?
yeah. I talk about this in class too.
Yeah. And the thing about it is he recognizes the value of conflict, that conflict is one of those things that gets a bad rap. Look, here's the thing. Your worst fight, your most vicious fight is probably with the person you love the most. And you can think about it, and there's not an answer to the fight that you're having.
Mhm,
It's just a conflict that you have to struggle with.
mhm.
And there is something that is the beauty of conflict is conflict better than anything else starts clarifying the values that you have.
Yeah,
And maybe those by the way, maybe those values are crackpot values. And maybe you need to start looking at your values again.
yeah.
I
And
mean,
and anytime you're in a relationship, I mean, you have to start working on our values, not your values and my values.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's not just individual at like so I want to say 2 things about that. One, it's you have to always get our, not yours and mine, and
yes.
then it's magnified in an organizational context.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Darren. Because here's the thing that happens more in organizations than it does the family, although this occasionally happens as well. Once you start resorting to power and title, you lose,
Yeah.
and that's a problem. You know that intuitively at home. When you have to pull out the "I'm the dad" card, you're probably not making an argument that you could support very well.
At that point, you're done. You're just like,
Yeah,
just do it because we went round and round. I haven't been able to
yeah,
convince you.
right. And really, I gotta say one of the things that, to a certain extent, with the children, you because I said so. Yeah, yeah. To a certain extent, with children, remember that children don't have. I hate the culture around us that has aggrandized the judgment of children. I work with people who are 18 to 22 all day long. Let me tell you what they know. Not very much.
Yeah, they gotta have a brain at
Um,
that point.
they don't. And
No.
and 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 by the way, it's not because they're stupid, it's because they're ignorant.
No, it's just a matter of life experience, right? I
Yeah,
mean, give it
when
time.
exactly. I mean, the students that I love the most are the ones who are putting themselves through college because
Mhm.
they know what things cost, and
Yeah.
they know that time needs to be invested in things that are worth doing. And the ones who have the college handed to them are the ones who probably have the most unrealistic expectations.
Yep.
And I mean that I understand that, but they feel like they are entitled to things that they're probably not entitled to.
Yep.
But the ones who had to work for it, the ones who say, "Okay, doc," and by the way, they are also the most respectful people I have in my classroom. And they will say something
Sure.
like, "Dr. Embry, I understand, 5 o'clock, you're with your family." I can't tell you how much I appreciate those students. Um, when you look at children and when you have to pull out the dad card, sometimes that's warranted.
Mhm.
If you are in if you're in an organization and you have to pull out because I'm the boss, because I'm the manager,
Yeah. I've never
Because
seen anything good come from somebody say, "Well, because I'm the vice president, that's why."
and by
Okay.
the way, it doesn't have to be articulated. If it's just understood within the room, that's enough.
You know what
And
Eric you
go
know
ahead.
what Eric Schmidt calls that? Eric Schmidt from Google
No,
Alphabet? He
no.
calls that you now you're dealing with hippos, the highest paid person's opinion, and you no longer have a meritocracy. And there's something really brilliant about that because if you shut down that communication, they're not going to bring you the stuff that you need.
That's exactly right. That's
So,
exactly right. Unless and by the way, I think one of the things in some organizations, efficiency really is more important than anything else. My son is a McDonald's employee. And by the way, very proud of him for what he's doing at McDonald's. But McDonald's has been
and he's like
making
he's now 35, right? So that's pretty.
he is now 17, soon to be 18 in July. Uh, Very proud of that. But here's the thing that Jake has learned, and I'm very proud of him for this. There's a good way to make a hamburger, and there's a bad way to make a hamburger.
Mhm.
And there's a really cool, a good way to make a hamburger faster. And if you do this, this, and this, I mean, he was talking to me the other day. He said, "Dad, I can't believe when people had. Did you know that when people have a little bit of time, they don't go back to the freezer to go get the hamburgers?" And I was like, "Good for you. You just learned that."
He's
He said,
going
"Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah." He said it's so much easier if I go ahead and put the fry bags up, and if I go ahead and get out the meat, and if I pull out some of the hamburger buns from the freezer, they're ready for me.
Mhm.
Okay, that's efficiency.
Yeah.
And that's something where, McDonald's runs a tight ship and it should. And by the way, should they yell at kids that are just loafing? Yes, I do believe that's true. I think they should. I think they should. Okay, kids, you guys, you need to get on board. This is not very difficult, and the process is very simple. But if you're in a profession where you need to engage your brain, if you need to engage your creativity, consider that inefficiencies are probably part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Say that
That
again. That's interesting.
yeah, if you're in a profession where thinking and trying to problem solve around creative solutions,
Mhm.
inefficiencies are probably gifts for you.
Yeah, and I've said this when we're dealing with leadership. Like you have to have slack in the system because if you're humming at 99%, complete efficiency, you don't have the ability to shift if you need to shift.
Yeah,
If you're in an agile system, you have to have that slack.
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, my great uncle Paul, he used to go to Sedona every year, and let me tell you how he found Sedona. He got lost. He got lost in New Mexico once, and he figured out that the Sedona was beautiful. I My uncle Paul, owned a trucking company, and so, I mean, he knew all about, getting long haul stuff, and this was way before GPS or anything like that.
Mhm.
Sedona became his annual retreat, and he got there because he got lost, and thank goodness he got lost. I mean, the thing about it is we all have a good story about, boy, I remember there was this really tough problem that I was having, and I just had to think about it for a long time. And ultimately, one of two things happened. The problem went away because it got solved because I didn't do anything,
Mhm.
or I came up with a solution that actually solved a lot of things for me. And it
Mhm.
was not the first thing that I thought of. I mean, the thing about I do, Darren and I both do an insane amount of paperwork. Yeah, that's exactly right. Uh, Darren and I both do an insane amount of paperwork, and sometimes the paperwork that you procrastination is not always a bad thing. Sometimes procrastination is a gift
Yeah.
because what it will do for you is I've learned that if they ask for it the second time, they probably really need it.
Yeah.
If they if
I
they
give it to the
don't,
fourth. They don't like that so much, but at that point they earned it, I figure.
yeah, I mean, we've all been to the doctor's office where there's this one form that says your name, your address, and then you turn the page, your name and your address, and then you turn the page, your name and your address, and suddenly they've got your name and address 17 or 18 times, and
Mhm.
you're just sitting here thinking, okay, why couldn't they get this off one form? Look, there's an inefficiency there.
Mhm.
Sometimes inefficiencies are just bad. So anyway, Darren, I'm not even sure I'm answering your question
Yeah, no, so
anymore.
we're talking about effectiveness, and I like where you wandered in here in that into inefficiency is actually efficient because there's something to that. There's something true about this. Like, again, I come from a different frame, but we speak the same language,
Yeah.
right? When people come new into an organization, I say, like, don't try to be efficient. Go meet people, go talk to them, go spend time with them. That time that
Yes.
you sit down just relaxing and getting to know them is going to pay huge dividends, far more than anything you could get by trying to be efficient right out of the gate.
In my podcast, I talk a lot about what I call digital discipleship.
Mhm.
Every church basically, once COVID happened, they had to start streaming services, and there's something that you lose by not being in a room with people. And here's what you lose: you lose the conflict.
Mhm.
Y the it is one type of Christianity to be watching some homily online, and it's a very different Christianity when your pew, when your seat is being occupied by people that don't belong there because that's your seat, and now you've gotta figure out what your value system really is. Um, when you figure out that conflict is part of every important relationship that you have, then you better figure out how to deal with conflict.
Yeah.
And you also need to start figuring out what's really important to you. Uh, you can be right all day long. And by the way, Darren and I are both academics. We love researching stuff. I mean, when my wife came to me the other day, she wanted one of those robot vacuum cleaners. I spent 4 weeks in bliss researching robot vacuum cleaners. And I can tell you, by the way, which is absolutely the best one. And my
So
wife was like 3 weeks ago. She was like, "Do we have one yet?" Yeah, I mean,
I
go ahead. I'm sorry.
actually I actually like people like you because I can get the answer from them, which is the best robot vacuum cleaner.
It is. I'll go ahead and tell you. It's the Dbot Osmo Ozmo T8 AIVI. A
Okay.
little bit pricey, but the beauty of this one, and this is completely free, ladies and gentlemen. Um, the beauty of this one is it has cameras on the front of it that will recognize wires and dog poop and socks, and it will go around those things. That's genius. Oh, no,
Yeah.
I know, Alexis. You see it. You see it, don't you? I 4 or 5 years ago, but my entire family takes advantage of the fact that I overanalyze things. And 4 or 5 years ago, my uncle Dwight up in Litchfield, Kentucky, said, "Hey, Kenny, what kind of robot do I need to get?" And so I told him this one, and about 4 weeks later, he said, "Hey, that's a good one, but I got dog crap all over my house now." So, because that one got a piece of dog poop. So anyway,
Okay, so I've got to switch gears and
okay,
actually kind of stay on track with where we are.
I
I
understand.
invited this rabbit, so, that's egg on my face with effective communication, right?
Sure.
Okay, so I want you to talk about tips and tricks to convince an audience of whatever it is that you're trying to persuade them of.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens is Aristotle suggested that there were three major persuasive tools. They are ethos, pathos, and logos. You might have heard of these.
Sure.
Ethos is it's often called the ethical appeal, but it's really more accurately speaker credibility. And when we look at speaker credibility, it does have an ethical part of it, which is, can I trust you to be telling me the truth?
Sure.
That's one part of it, and the other part of it is, and do you know what you're talking about? Do you have any expertise?
Hmm.
And we will grant people that you're telling them the truth until they prove otherwise.
Okay.
We will not grant expertise.
Right.
We
Yeah,
will
you
we
have to prove that, right?
bingo.
Yeah.
You have to prove your expertise. But I mean pathos and logos. Pathos is an emotional appeal. And it has been given a lot of press because we understand that emotional appeals can be very, very powerful. But then then there's the logos. And logos will appeal to some people immediately,
Hmm.
but not everyone. And one of the things that I argue with my students is, and it's a little exercise that I run with my students every semester, and I give them what I call the phrase that pays: that emotions motivate, but logic justifies. And the exercise, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I said this yesterday. Something very similar.
yeah,
Dennis Peacock says the mind justifies what the heart has chosen.
he and I would be basically doing saying
Yeah. So your
exactly the same
phrase
thing.
was what now?
Emotions motivate, logic justifies.
Yeah,
And
that's something.
the argument that, and here's the little experiment, and run this experiment with a group of people yourself. I ask all of my students, "What's your dream car?" And they, Tesla, BMWs, whatever.
Hmm.
And I say, "Okay, why is it your dream car?" And when they start listing the reasons why, it's cool, it looks good, it's fun, it's fast. And then when I ask them, okay, now the job has changed. Now I need you to convince your parents to buy you that car. What do you tell your parents in order to get them to buy you that car? It's safe. It gets good gas mileage. It will keep its resale value. In other words, emotions motivated them to the decision of the car, and then logic when they have to
Yeah.
justify the car, they go to logic. But hold on, here's the most important point. I say, okay, just for sake of argument, let's say your car is $50,000.
Mhm.
I'm going to give you $50,000. Are you going to buy your car? Not a single student says they're going to buy the car. I said, well, I'm giving you $50,000, and that's going to buy your car. Are you going to buy it? No. Why not? Well, there's insurance and there's all. In other words, in order to choose that car, you had to have the emotion.
Yeah, and they didn't. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you had to justify the car, but you couldn't justify the expense.
yeah,
So you needed both emotions and logic to justify, to make a decision.
yeah,
If you leave one of those on the if you lead with logic, you will never get anybody motivated for your decision.
yeah. Again, the parallels are just
Yeah,
amazing here. I talk about this in class. The
yeah,
same thing. You have to speak to that person's heart.
yeah.
Don't tell them like Martin Luther King didn't say, "I have four really interesting intellectual right? I have a dream, right?
Oh
You
my
have to
goodness,
speak
yeah,
to their heart. You got to stop talking to this. Talk to
yeah,
this because and
yeah,
I say it in class like this. If you show me that you have my back, you get my heart,
yeah. That's
right?
exactly right.
So you demonstrate that you're there for me and you got my back, you get my heart. And that's the way it works. Not like, wow, he's really a very sharp executive.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah, he's
exactly
also
right.
going to throw you under the bus as soon as it works well for him. So we don't trust that. We trust somebody who cares about us, right?
That is exactly right. And the other thing that I would say, and this is not the same point, but it's very similar to what you just said, which is this: the only people who have the right to criticize you are the people who love you. The people who
Wow.
we the people who do not have the right to criticize you. And think about this.
Yeah.
Who has the right to criticize you? Your mom, your parents, your children, maybe if they have anything knocking around in their head, your spouse. I mean, the people that you know have the ultimate best intention for you is the only people who can criticize you and have it stick. If, on the other hand, you hate where you work, you hate your boss, it doesn't really make any difference what they say.
Yeah.
Again, I consider communication primarily relational.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when you get up there, if say it's your mom and you're watching her give a speech and you recognize that she's used incorrect grammar, that some of the statistics were wrong, that she jumbled up the last part of her speech, are you going to attack her at the end of this? Is that what you're going to do? No. Everybody that loves her is going to say exactly the same thing. She really tried hard. I'm really proud of her for trying.
Mhm.
Versus this guy you cannot stand who put the comma in the wrong place. And now that's all you're going to focus on.
Yep.
Or they mismatched the word. Look, they got 99% of it wrong, and you're going to focus on the 1%. Why? You hate them. Versus your mom who got 95% of it wrong, but you love her.
Yeah.
And you'll
So
cut her.
is that
Yeah,
a quote from somewhere? What you just said?
I don't know.
No,
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it's really profound. I mean, I just, as you were talking, I was thinking like I can say all day long, like going back to when I was a little kid, I hate my sister, I hate my sister, I hate my sister. But if you say you hate my sister,
Oh,
you
boy.
better
Yeah.
bring it because I'm coming for you, right?
That's
It's an
exactly right.
amazing, like, how did I just reverse from this to that in
Yeah.
no time? It's because
But
of who said it.
that's exactly right. And you think about what the best communicators don't have to be very good at communication. The best communicators are the ones who figure out how to have good relationships
Wow, that's
because
deep.
those are the ones that again, I say communication is primarily relational.
Mhm.
And that's why. Um, If you are interested in talking to a group of strangers, there are absolutely a bunch of tips I can give you for how to try and communicate to people that don't know you very well.
Mhm.
But you're by far and away the best communication people are the people who already have a reputation that precedes them. There's an old, well, I mean, I could talk about a lot of these people. So I mean, my guess, my guess is, my guess is you probably have a couple more questions, Darren. So
Yeah, I do have a couple more questions.
okay,
Okay, so I was talking more in the some of my questions were things like if you don't know these people. Okay, so
yeah,
everything you said about relationship is gold. I mean, I I believe that. I mean, this that reframes that changes our minds in the way that we
right,
pursue communication, like in an organizational context. Let's use the context where we're not necessarily we don't know them very well. How do you
right,
keep an audience's attention? How do you what strategies are involved? I mean, it seems like in a digital world where we look at our phone like every 10 minutes, it people's attention span it goes like that. But when I'm looking at this crowd here as we're talking, like
yeah,
nobody's been nodding off. I mean, everybody's engaged, right? The-
yeah. And
so
by the, go ahead, Darren.
so
Go
yeah,
ahead.
so how do you keep attention? That's my question.
I I'll go ahead and tell you. My guess is, and I don't want to be putting words in any of your all's mouths, and I don't want to be reading your thoughts. But my guess is, to a certain extent, you like me a little bit, and let me tell you why. You heard the dog, you heard me talk about my wife, you heard me talk about my relationship with my family. In other words, you know me more than just a talking head.
Wow.
Story and narrative is quite possibly the most important thing you've got going for you. And if you feel like you need to divorce yourself from the topic, then why the heck are you talking about it?
Mm,
And why are you the one to be telling me this? The more you can personalize and experience, the more people are going to relate to you. And by the way, the more they relate to you, the more they'll relate to your topic. I am not naturally somebody interested in Star Trek, but I tell you what, I am so excited to be around people who are because they're excited about something. They're thrilled about Star Trek. My boys love superheroes. I like them too. I mean, they got it for me. But let me tell you what lights them up is when we start talking about WandaVision or Mandalorian or one of those. We have a great time.
mhm.
Not like I needed any incentive to get them to pay attention to me. Get your audience excited about, figure out what excites your audience and then tell a couple stories about that.
Did you know that the Mandalorian puts his dishes on the left-hand side of the dishwasher?
Well, you see, my wife does not watch The Mandalorian, so she would tell him. She
I'm
would
just
tell
no,
him.
I'm saying for your kids to understand that.
Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to work. Okay,
There, go
that
ahead.
that brings me to another question, and that is about humor. Tell me about
Yes.
using humor when you're dealing with your audience. I mean,
Uh,
is it a good idea, bad idea? Does it get them to do stuff? Does it, what does it do?
Humor is dynamite, very literally. Humor, dynamite is extremely powerful, and it can be used very powerfully in a negative or positive direction. Are you trying to blow it up, or are you trying to are you trying to keep something together? Because the point of humor is it's making fun of something.
Okay.
And if you're going to be making fun of something, one of the things you need to figure out is how important is this thing to
Mhm.
your audience. Um, I, I, I remember this one time I was in church making announcements, and I was talking about I couldn't remember announcement that I had to make, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I'm having an Alzheimer's moment." Little did I know that there was somebody dying of Alzheimer's in the audience.
Mm,
Okay, meant to be a point of levity,
right.
was not. And I heard the audience just go, and I was like, "Okay, that didn't work." Um, so the beauty of that is I had enough emotional capital with them that they were willing to say, "Kenny just put his foot in his mouth." Okay.
So how do you like your new church?
This has been several years ago. That's true. Um, I was living at Louisville at the time, and I now live right out of Tampa. Um, but anyway, I mean, the thing about humor is when it hits good, there's nothing better than it, and especially if you can get people on board with you. One of the things that I tell my students all the time is be careful how much you make fun of yourself, because that is the tendency of all of us.
Yeah,
But
I thought self-deprecating humor was like better.
it's safer, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
It's definitely safer, but one of the things that I would say is remember in your first interactions with an audience, you're trying to do two conflicting things: get them to like you, and then get them to respect you.
Okay.
And if you're trying to come across as the authority on whatever it is, if you start off by saying, "Boy, I'm an idiot," in so many
Right. Right.
words, you kind of have shot yourself in the foot because you have now given them permission to say, maybe Darren's judgment is not all that good. I think one of the things that you need to, especially with like marital spats or something like that that are fairly common,
Mhm.
sure, make fun of yourself all day long. But if you're going to be
It's not
talking,
on the topic that you're talking about.
bingo.
Right.
In other words, I think that makes a lot of sense. But make sure that the humor, number one, does not offend your audience. And
Okay.
if it doesn't, I mean, if it doesn't, by all means, go for it. If you're at the Democratic National Convention, take as many shots as Trump as you want to. But if you're at the
Might
RNC,
be able to do that at the RNC too,
maybe so.
depending on who the audience is. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so you can't do that when it's something. It's like what you just talked about with like, I hate my sister. I hate my sister. No,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And somebody said that the soapbox, you shouldn't get on your soapbox too often. It depends what kind of audience you're talking to and what kind of soapbox. Again, I think one of the things that I would say is with my podcast, I had no idea that anybody would be interested in parenting. Honestly, my avatar for my podcast is my 17-year-old son. And I was thinking that the guy who was going to be talking to me would be talking about it from a teenage perspective. Fits my avatar perfectly.
Okay, so if you like that, go on to part 3 of this talk between Kenny Embry and myself, and I will see you in the next episode.